By every measurable standard, Elena Reyes was perfect. She had the highest GPA in her cohort, 3 published papers in prestigious journals, and a surgical hand steadier than most residents. Her professors used her work as a benchmark. Her peers watched her with equal parts awe and resentment. She was the girl who never cracked, until the cracks became invisible and started forming on the inside. Lately, Elena's days bled together in a hazy loop of all-nighters, black coffee, and antiseptic-scented corridors. Her planner was color-coded to the minute. Her apartment was spotless. Her smile, automatic, tight, rarely slipped. But her mind was fraying like a silk ribbon left too long in the wind. She started forgetting things. First, small ones, where she parked her bike, whether she'd already taken her supplements, what day it was. Then it got worse. She woke up in the wrong building once, curled on a leather couch in the faculty lounge, shoes off, a surgical suture kit open beside her. Her hands were trembling, stained with iodine. She had no memory of how she got there. Dreams turned into distortions. Medical diagrams came alive in her notes, shifting when she looked away. A cadaver in the lab whispered her name. She laughed it off with classmates, med school brain melt, but inside, she wasn't so sure. She started recording voice memos to herself. "You are awake. You are in control. This is real." Sometimes she'd listen back and hear herself saying things she didn't remember recording. "Don't trust the white coats. You're not who you think you are." She blamed it on exhaustion. Everyone did. Sleep 2 hours a night for weeks, and your brain goes sideways, right? But then came the sharp sense of déjà vu in unfamiliar places. Flashbacks that didn't match her memories. Hallucinations too vivid to be dismissed, her reflection lagging in the mirror, her phone buzzing with calls she never received. And the migraines, blinding, punishing storms that left her retching and clutching her head in silent stairwells between rotations. One night, during a routine anatomy lab, she looked down at her hands and realized she'd stitched her own palm, deep, neat sutures, almost artistic. Blood seeped between her fingers, and she felt nothing but a numbing dread. Not pain. Not confusion. Just an overwhelming certainty. This wasn't just sleep deprivation. Someone was unraveling her from the inside out. If Elena Reyes was the brain, Kian Vale was the heart. He was her anchor, her ritual. Coffee at 6 a.m., study marathons with lo-fi playlists, whispered jokes during cadaver labs. While others found her intimidating, Kian never flinched. He understood her silences. Finished her thoughts. And when she started slipping, he was the only one who noticed. "I think you're pushing too hard," he told her once, brushing a curl from her temple during an impromptu rooftop study session. "You look like you're trying to outrun your own shadow." But Kian had shadows too. His notebooks were filled with dense equations and side notes in symbols she didn't recognize. He sometimes vanished for entire weekends with vague excuses, family stuff, research assistant duties, and returned more withdrawn, his gaze just slightly off, and then, just days before her world began to fracture, he disappeared entirely. No warning. No goodbye. His dorm room was stripped bare. His phone, disconnected. Campus security claimed he dropped out. The administration said his academic record had been expunged, which made no sense. Kian was top 5%, easily on track for honors. Something didn't add up. Elena tore through his old things, eventually finding one of their shared notebooks, his half of their anatomy review. Buried in the margins, between a diagram of the limbic system and a case study on dissociative states, were scribbled lines in red pen. "They're watching. If I disappear, check under the blacklight. You're not crazy, Elle. Just not asleep anymore." She borrowed a forensic lamp from the lab and scanned the notebook that night. Whole paragraphs lit up in ultraviolet ink. coordinates, cryptic sketches of lab layouts. And her name, dozens of times, with notes like, "Does she know yet? How much have they taken from her?" The last entry chilled her blood. I said yes. God help me. I said yes. I just wanted to understand what they did to you. Later that week, as she passed through a restricted corridor near the Biomedical Research Center, she paused at a locked steel door. It buzzed open for someone exiting, a hurried tech, distracted, and Elena caught a glimpse of the security log displayed on the terminal inside, there, listed under Recent Access, Kean Vale, 3:27 a.m. Lab 7R. 2 nights after his disappearance. For years, Elena believed she had earned her way into the Astraeus Mentorship Program, a mysterious yet prestigious initiative whispered about in every elite medical circle. Only the most promising students were invited. Membership guaranteed fast-tracked residencies, early access to surgical theaters, and mentorship under world-renowned physicians. The invitation had arrived her second year, a slim envelope on ivory paper, sealed in wax. No application. No explanation. Just a welcome and a promise, you are among the chosen. Prepare to exceed your limits. At first, it felt like a reward. Private seminars. Experimental procedures. Invitations to lectures not even faculty were allowed to attend. Elena was too exhausted, and too grateful, to question it. Most weren't even aware the program existed. And those who were, they said nothing. Some barely even remembered being part of it. Then came the inconsistencies. She overheard one of her professors call it the observatory in passing. Another referred to it as Phase 2. The mentor's eyes followed her too closely. Her medical file went missing twice. A neurologist from the program once asked her how she was sleeping, and then corrected her answer before she could finish speaking. One night, Elena followed a group of Astraeus students through a hidden elevator in the west wing of the hospital. It descended past the sub-basement. The walls turned from sterile white to raw concrete. What she saw in that level, rows of pods with EEG caps, students suspended in meditative states, biometric monitors tracking every blink, twitch, and dream cycle, was not mentorship. It was surveillance. She recognized faces, upperclassmen who'd mysteriously burned out and vanished from the program without explanation. They were here. Monitored. Sedated. One of them had a name tag still pinned to his scrubs, J. Delgado, subject 042. Elena ran. The next day, every mention of Delgado had been wiped from the school's internal portal. His nameplate outside the dorm was gone. Professors acted like he never existed, but the real fracture came when she dug deeper, into faculty records, through hacked login credentials Kean had once left her as a joke. In an archived personnel database, she found a name that turned her blood cold. Dr. Elena Reyes, Senior Cognitive Architect, Astraeus Division, her mother. Dead since Elena was 16. Or so she'd been told. Next to her name, status, classified. Project origin, approved. Subject lineage, active. Elena stared at the glowing screen, heart pounding, and realized the truth wasn't just buried beneath the university. It was woven through her bloodline. The first time Dr. Aidan Voss touched her hand, Elena felt it, a spark. He was everything her fractured world needed. Calm. Focused. Unyielding in his belief that there was something deeper behind the patterns of her unraveling mind. Elena, who had always relied on herself, began to let him in, just a little at first, then more as the days blurred and her sanity slipped further away. He was the neurologist with the keen eye, the compassionate smile, the quiet insistence that he could help. In the beginning, he was just another mentor, just another professional who seemed to care too much, too deeply for the well-being of a student. But over time, Aidan became more than that. He offered Elena something she hadn't realized she craved, understanding. Their late-night sessions in his office became something she looked forward to. The walls were lined with medical texts and research papers, but it was the light in his eyes when they spoke about the human brain that captivated her. He seemed genuinely fascinated by her case, the missing time, the hallucinations, the haunting dreams. "Elena," he said one evening, his voice low, almost too soft, "you're not crazy. You're being pushed past the limits of your mind. Someone's manipulating you." She wanted to believe him. She did, but somewhere between their shared glances and private whispers, something shifted. It was subtle at first. A touch on her shoulder that lingered too long. The way he studied her lips when they spoke, his gaze just a little too intense. She felt the shift, a dangerous pull she had never intended to feel. She found herself thinking of him between the clinical moments, imagining his hand on hers, his warm breath on her skin, and then came the night he kissed her. It wasn't planned. Neither of them had spoken of it. But there, under the hum of fluorescent lights in his office, the air between them thickened. She had just asked about Kian, about the sudden gap in his research, and Aiden's eyes had clouded over, an unreadable flicker passing through him. "Don't worry about Kian," he said, voice strained. "Let me help you." That was when it happened. He leaned in slowly, a careful inch at a time, and she didn't pull away. His lips were soft, tentative, but when they deepened, when his hands moved to cup her face, Elena felt something shatter inside her, like glass falling in slow motion. It was a betrayal, she realized, even as it was happening. A violation of trust. He was supposed to be helping her, guiding her through the darkness, not pulling her into it. She knew she should stop him, knew this would make things more complicated, but the truth was, she didn't want him to stop. The kiss broke with a breathless gasp, and Elena's mind whirled. She was suffocating in the confusion. Who was he, really? Was this a test, another layer of manipulation from the people who had already taken so much from her? Or was he a man who cared for her, trapped in his own moral dilemma? He didn't answer her questions. He didn't need to. His fingers lingered on her cheek for just a moment longer, as if begging her to make the decision for both of them, but she knew the truth. Aiden Voss had crossed a line, but so had she, and now, the question wasn't whether he was part of the conspiracy, it was whether he was the conspiracy. Elena had always known something was off, a low hum of unease beneath every success, every trophy, every praise she received. She could feel it in the coldness of her own reflection, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. But it wasn't until the moment she hacked into the Astraeus archives that the floodgates truly opened, revealing a truth she could never unsee. It started with the name. She hadn't expected to find it, Elena Reyes, her own name, buried deep in the coded files, hidden beneath layers of encryption. But it wasn't a file on her as she knew herself. This was a record, a history, a timeline that stretched back for years. She clicked through the files, her hands trembling as the screens glowed back at her with a story she wasn't supposed to know. Pages of medical data, genetic markers, and notes on her cognitive function, everything meticulously logged, as though her mind were a specimen in a glass jar. Every scan, every procedure, every test, all connected to one single project, Project Aurora. 100 questions flooded her mind, each one angrier than the last. What was Project Aurora? Why was her name so prominent in every document? Why were there dates in the past, of tests performed before she'd even entered medical school, and then came the punch to the gut, a series of videos, dated from 5 years ago. She clicked play. In the first, a woman stood in a sterile, high-tech lab. She was wearing a white coat, her face obscured by a surgical mask. But there was no mistaking the familiarity in the way she moved, the subtle tilt of her head, the curve of her lips when she spoke. The voice came through clear and cold. Subject Elena Reyes, genetic prototype number 7, beginning implantation of memory nodes. Preparation for life cycle in academic environment begins immediately. The words hung in the air like a nightmare taking form. Elena's breath caught in her throat. This was her mother's voice. The same voice she had heard in old recordings. The woman who had died years ago in a tragic accident was still alive, but not in the way Elena had thought. She had been the architect of this experiment. Her mother had designed it. She had created her. The next video was worse. It showed a younger version of Elena Reyes, her, lying on a hospital bed, hooked up to machines that monitored her brain waves. In the video, she wasn't a student at all. She was a prototype. A test subject that IT hit her like a freight train. The real Elena Reyes had died 5 years ago. The version of herself sitting at this terminal, struggling to make sense of a crumbling world, was just an iteration, one of many. A synthetic replica. A memory-crafted clone designed to be the perfect student, the perfect achiever. Designed to exceed the limits of human capacity, and to do so at the cost of her own mind. The final clip confirmed everything. The real Elena's body, cold and lifeless, was shown on a table. Her mother, Camila Reyes, standing above her with an expression of cold satisfaction. She's gone. But the work continues. We've perfected the procedure. The cycle will never end. Subject Elena Reyes will be reborn again and again, through the eyes of another iteration. We'll see how far we can push them. How much they can sacrifice before they break. Elena's head spun, her vision blurring. Her hands shook violently as the screen flickered, and the truth continued to rip through her mind like a chain of explosives. She wasn't who she thought she was, she had lived a lie. A carefully constructed life built on false memories, genetic manipulation, and years of testing. And now, the experiment was reaching its final phase. Her breakdown, the weight of it all crushed her chest, and for a moment, she felt utterly, terribly alone. Alone in a body that wasn't hers. Alone in a life she hadn't chosen. Alone in a world that was not her own, but something shifted in her, a spark of defiance, the one thing that had remained in every version of her. She wasn't just a subject. She was a person. And this cycle would be the last. She stood, her body trembling but resolute. Elena Reyes, whatever she was now, would fight to the end. She would expose the truth, tear down the system that had made her, and make them remember what it meant to be human, even if it meant destroying herself in the process.